Recording in progress.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. We have a great night for you. We have a special guest with us, Naomi Peña. And Naomi is the founder of the Literacy Academy Collective, along with other people as well. She is a community and education activist, and she is the current vice president of District 1 Community Education Council. She and others got together with a mission to create the first Department of Education public school for children with dyslexia, language-based learning disabilities, and other struggling readers. So we welcome Naomi with us tonight. And we are going to be reviewing an article that is relevant to all three of us, since we're all New Yorkers here. Yay! And the article is entitled, "Hundreds of New York City elementary schools use Teachers College reading curriculum Banks said has not worked," by Alex Zimmerman and Yoav Gonen from the city. This is an ongoing collaborative series between Chalkbeat and the city, doing some investigative work on learning differences, special education, and other education challenges in city schools. So usually I start off with a question, but because, Naomi, people don't know you, and I think that you have such an interesting bio, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, because I think it's very relevant to the article that we are reviewing tonight. So go ahead, tell us.
Thank you, Faith, and thank you, Judy, for having me today. I'm super excited to be here and to have a conversation around this work. So as mentioned, my name is Naomi Peña, and I am one of the fierce mom of six who joined forces together to create Literacy Academy Collective. We are a group of moms who collectively have 10 dyslexic children amongst us. Me, myself, all 4 of my children are dyslexic. My oldest is turning 23 this year, and my youngest are 12-year-old twins. And just like any diagnosis, any condition, in my household, dyslexia runs on a spectrum. So I have 2 that are kind of the more severely dyslexic, and then I have the other 2 who are more like the milder. So if you refer to the ladder of reading, 2 of my kids are on the red, and I have 2 who are around the orange. I come from this work just knowing massively the deep struggle of watching your children suffer in the classroom, how it takes a toll on their self-esteem, how as a parent you really massively feel helpless in trying to support them. And for the last almost 17 years, I've tried to figure out how I can support my children. And what I found is that every time I try to have a conversation, even other the word dyslexia, initially I was kind of dismissed. I was told I was an overreacting mom, that everything will be fine. One school psychologist told me that it was fine if one of my kids didn't read past their 3rd grade, that some kids just read on their own, that I needed to calm down, which always makes me do the opposite.
Of course.
But fundamentally, I also felt really deflated because I'm also raising children of color. And, we could cut the stats however we want, but ultimately when we look at the stats of children of color and reading, they're often the ones that often need the most support. Initially, when I started this, almost 17 years ago, I didn't have all the resources that I do now because I just didn't know what existed. I didn't know what I can do. I've heard of these things, But, for a reading intervention course, I would need to stop working at 3:30 in the afternoon to go get a kid, bring them somewhere. I didn't have those resources available. I didn't have the time to take off of work, didn't have the support. Obviously 17 years later, I do. But, you know, all of that culminated into a conversation when Imagine Schools, when New York City put out an Imagine Schools process, kind of saying, we would love to create new schools, please apply. A couple of the moms had the same idea, and that's how this whole situation started. Two of the moms that were both public school moms, both of their children were struggling. They ended up at Windward, did not know each other. They both approached the head of school with the same idea of like, we should do this. And the principal was like, hey, the head of school basically said, it's funny how you're approaching me. Someone else just approached me. You two should talk. And that was kind of like the beginning of this whole wild and crazy, almost 4-year journey to get to this point.
Wow. So, Judy works with the New York City Department of Education, and we just want to make it clear that all views are our own views. And, we are talking about New York City tonight, but I think this is relevant to schools across the country. Yeah. So Judy, why don't you jump in right now? And if you have a question, we'll use your question to kind of jump around and have our conversation tonight, relevant to the article, of course. Yeah.
So Naomi, first of all, I want to thank you for being here with us today. I've been really, really excited to meet you. And your story came to life for me. Everybody was listening to Sold a Story. That was like what everybody talked about. It was the only thing anybody talked about. And, that was a really hard chapter for me because it talked about some things that I was formally trained in, one of them being reading recovery. In 2013, that was what was hot in New York City schools. And a lot of that training was great, but a lot of it wasn't. So as you know, for the last 5 years, I was on the universal literacy team, and now I'm on another team that's also working towards the same goals. But one day I was listening, I think it was a podcast called First Person by Lulu Garcia.
Yep.
And it was your story. And I literally listened to your story, and even when I see your face, I started crying. I could not take how much pain I heard coming from you. And it almost made me feel guilty that you had to suffer so much, because I'm a mom too. I'm raising 2 boys. Now one of them is grown, and all of our kids go down different paths. But when I heard your story, that one of your kids, he left school, I started to cry so much because, you told your story and it was so honest, and I felt the pain coming through. But then also hearing that you were able to get, your other kids help, how that must have felt as a parent, because, I've had situations like that. All moms have. That's something else. And I think it was a courageous story to tell. I think it was an important story to tell. And I think you have so much you can offer our viewers. We want to hear the voice of parents, because you know what? Parents really have to be a part of the decision-making on what's going on in our schools. So I thank you for being involved, and I can't wait to get to know you better.
Yeah, thank you. It was that they have reached out to me several months before, just like talking about my story. And
Right.
Once we got to the point of recording, it was late night. I went over to the New York Times office, and I was like, all right, we're gonna do this. And I always, depends on kind of the mood, depends on the circumstance, but I've said my story enough that I trust and believe, like I will say my story, and sometimes I cry, sometimes I don't. But when Lulu asked me towards the end, I was like, oh man, I know I'm gonna cry. And sure enough, and I don't know if she was going to keep it. Of course, she kept it, which is fine, because I do want people to know that this is just not something that's flippant. There's not something that's just like, oh, I just want my kids to read. Like they need to understand the deep toll this takes on the children, on the kids, on the parent. And also one of the narratives that I think is massively missing is the teachers. And I'm glad that Sold a Story did some of that. We're also talking to our pilot classroom teachers, and they kind of gave a perspective that was like, man, I wish I can bottle this and like share it with the world so they can hear how just because you've been doing things one way,
Right.
doesn't mean that you have failed. It doesn't mean that you were bad. It doesn't
Right.
mean, it just means that you didn't know. It just means you weren't taught the other way.
That's
And
it.
it's taught a different way and it works. You know,
Yes.
there's some fascinating stories that have come from our pilot that literally I walked out of there in tears of just like some really great feel good stories.
Yeah. So
And I
Naomi,
this starts
yeah.
with teachers, so I hands down agree with you.
Yep.
So I just want to jump in and say that I was one of those teachers trained in the 80s in everything that we know now shouldn't be done. And I got my master's in reading, and it didn't really do anything to help me to know anything better. So I went down that road. So I certainly understand it. And it was all self-funded as far as what I had to do to get to where I am now. But I do want to stick to the article. So I am going to throw a question out to you and a statement from the article. And I want you to respond. It says here in the article that the city has not formally requested that schools abandon Teachers College or some of the most questionable practices associated with it. How does that make you feel?
It angers me deeply because I think, you know, in a perfect world, the administration knows why we're here. And look, and I think it's amazing that we're having this conversation to begin with, because I think individually, when you get to this point, you kind of feel like you're screaming in a void and no one's hearing. But it's also a testament of how massively big the New York City public school administration is. Like, Department of Education is massive. And the layers to this is like a massively big onion that it just keeps going and going and going. And it's not meant to be easy. And it's not. As a parent in the system, just navigating the way this works, it's never easy. I mean, look at how to apply to middle school, how to apply to high school,
Yeah.
applying for college. It's insane.
Yes.
So I never expected this to be easy. And I've been in the education space as a parent advocate for the last 8 years. So I fully am immersed and knew that none of this was going to come, you know, easy. But I also think the fact that there is this level of autonomy that exists in the Department of Education, particularly from school to school, there's like a ridiculous amount of curriculum that principals can choose from, and that's great, except there is no real active push to say why you can't choose from these curriculums. Like, why do we have 50 math curriculums? I'm hearing, like, why?
Right.
You can't tell me they all work, because if that was the
No.
case, we all would have high flyers in math, and that's not the case.
No.
So I've always questioned, why can't we just look at what's working and use that and make our lives so much more easy? Then we all know what to expect and what we're walking into. But it's not something that I am astonished about. It's something that I'm massively frustrated about. But it also is a testament of, we have a lot of work to do, because I've always said I can train every single school teacher in the system in structured literacy. But if the principal is not on board, and Judy, I think you would know this as a ULIT coach,
Mhm.
I've heard that some ULIT coaches were ready and able to do some work, but if the principal was not on board, it was not happening in
Mhm.
their building. And it's hard. It's hard to convince someone
Yeah.
that what they've been doing is actually quite harmful. It wasn't helpful.
Well, interesting, Judy, you actually said something about do it yourself. You've mentioned this.
Oh, I
Kind
have
of
seen that in the
times,
past.
you know,
I'm not seeing that right now, but yeah, I have seen do it yourself. That's basically, this article talked a lot about TC, and yes, TC has a lot of pitfalls. Looking at the picture, adios to that, goodbye, done. Look at the word, slide through the word, apply what you know about those syllables or about word parts, word families, whatever it is. However, there's also schools nationwide that have a do-it-yourself model where kids that possibly just graduated college don't know much about writing curriculum, because I've been in education for 25 years. I don't have any business writing curriculum. I'm a great coach. I'm a great teacher. I have no,
She says this.
listen, I'm honest. I work hard. I bust my ass. I got Orton Gillingham trained on my own, writing revolution. I am that passionate. And you know what? It took me a long time to feel confident, but I feel that for the last 6 years, I've invested my whole entire being, besides taking care of my sons, to finding out how to do better for kids. And I think the literacy, do it yourself is real crap. It has to stop. It has to stop. Teachers should not be writing curriculum. Let's have a lesson. Let's look at the lesson. Let's think about how to do a damn good lesson. But how much time do teachers have? Plan a lesson, write the curriculum, be on the leadership team, be on the data team, do
But
the
Judy,
family
okay,
engagement.
so let's wait a minute. Wait a
One
minute.
thing, Faith, one thing. So I was, reading all the notes, and I thought of a Chicago song. I don't know, Naomi, I don't know if you know Chicago. It's probably from the 80s, 90s. Anyway, there's a song, It's Such a Hard Habit to Break. And I think that that's what people are struggling with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bad habits are hard for kids to break. Bad habits are hard for teachers to break. Bad habits are hard for principals to break. And shifting your mindset is harder for some people than other people.
Mhm.
But I think shifts are starting. What do you say, guys?
So I'm going to tell you that my experience, that's why I wrote failing students or failing schools, because that is the story of my life, that I was also, Naomi, a coach, not in the city, but I was a regional literacy coach with Reading First here on Long Island. And mindset is the hardest thing to change.
Yep.
You could show anybody how to do something, but to kind of shift a mindset after you've been trained and your heart went into something. In the article, they said, it's like all of a sudden you're told everything you knew is wrong is very hard. I was ready for that because I saw it myself, but a lot of people just feel whatever they were doing did work. So I want to go back to the article, and there was something else that I wanted to throw out there to you. And it said, which this was interesting, a significant chunk of students, particularly those who have support for reading at home, have no trouble learning to read under the teacher's college model. And multiple educators said they appreciated that the program treats students as thinkers who should be encouraged to develop a love of literature. Well, I'd like to know what you think of that, Naomi.
I will tell you that all children are thinkers. All children love to read, and all children want to do well. I would just tell you from my own personal experience, for years, I was told I was questioned if the reason that my children could not read was because I wasn't reading enough to them, as if the words that I would say to them would miraculously like make things better, or if I had books at home, because apparently if you just hold a book by way of some magical pixie dust, it's supposed to work.
Right.
It's not like you could sleep underneath the book and it just like automatically transfers into your brain, like in some movies. I will tell you that the amount of sort of the way that my children were described throughout the years, particularly my oldest, really starts to take a toll on the child. When you're the first, I think one thing people need to understand is, as a child, your first social interaction outside the home is in the classroom.
That's
So
right.
you're socializing with students, but it's also your first interaction with adults outside of your home. And, that's why a positive story of a teacher is so impactful on a child. Like that makes the world of a difference. If
That's
you're
right.
seen and you are heard from an adult outside of your home, you feel like you matter. You feel like you're acknowledged and you're appreciated. But on the flip side, if what you're hearing from these adults is that you're lazy, that you don't care, that you're not invested in your education, and by default, if your child is that way, you must be the same way as well, that starts to take a toll. And as a parent, when you don't know any, I always look at my teachers as part of my village for that 1 year. I always made it a point to sit down with teachers and say, hey, this is the way my child learns. He's diagnosed with dyslexia. And I was always astonished by how dismissive people were of that. People were like, oh, that's just reversing letters. They're fine. I'm like, no, it's not. And either I was seemed to like be overreacting, or it's fine, don't worry about it. But there was this 1 year where he was bedwetting. He was in the 3rd grade and he was bedwetting, and he didn't want, he was school refusing. And I didn't realize how damaged he was in that classroom until he went to 4th grade. And he later told me, basically, that teacher just, for whatever reason, did not see him. And literally, he was invisible in the classroom, and she made it a point to make him invisible, to the point where even after he left her classroom and he went beyond, he would see her in the hallway and he would want to say hi, and she would ignore him as if, he stole a candy from her or something like that. And I think people need to understand that children don't care. Children do care. Children want to do well. But if you don't empower them with the right information and give them the tools they need to be successful, it's not going to matter. And this is one of the things that we say as a team is, reading is a fundamental civil right. There's an ugly history in this country of how we limit to read, who can read, and the implications of that, but also the access that grants you. I mean, and reading is so ingrained in our lives. I mean, in order to look at your phone, you need to read, right? Going to a restaurant to read a menu, you need to read. Right. Even going to the DMV, like to pay your tickets, like it's all massively involved. And the minute you don't have that access, it literally dictates the rest of your trajectory in life.
Yes, yes. Judy, it says in the article that out of 600 public elementary schools, 48% said they were still using TC, and about 200 elementary schools did not participate in this survey. And it's assumed that those 200 probably are using TC. So the number is way higher than this. I know that you and other coaches are working very hard doing what you're doing, but what do you think about this idea of people still holding on to something that's so controversial, like why, I know we said it's a hard habit to break, but come on, what do you think about that? Are those numbers accurate in your estimation?
So I think that people's relationship with TC is like a bad marriage, and I think the marriage has to end. I think that I personally believe, my personal belief, not the DOE belief, Judy's belief, I definitely think we have to have a drop-down menu of evidence-based, science-backed choices of what we can use for our literacy buck. And Faith, I know I say this every episode, it can't just be for that 30 minutes of foundations or phonics. We have to have a phonemic awareness component. We have to have, what does the rest of the ELA block look like? I don't think it really should be optional, in my opinion, to use that program anymore. And I think it's unfortunate because, yes, they came out with a new revised program. We don't know how that's going to do in the field, right? Every program takes a long time to show if it's gaining good results, but the proof is in the pudding. The data was very low citywide using that program. And I think it's also unfortunate. What about schools that didn't want to spend more money and said, you know what, I'm going to use the old version of TC, and they continue to have kids looking at the picture, not sliding through the word. That's really hard for kids. If their whole literacy block, there's pieces of this, there's pieces of balanced literacy, and then there's pieces of foundations, but here I'm being told I could use the picture. Kids get confused.
Yes, well, that's the problem. That's the problem. There's these mixed.
No, it's not just a problem, Faith.
It's BS. All right. So, Naomi, in the article, it said that it would cost up to $425 per classroom to update TC. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that would really make a difference?
I fundamentally believe, this is like Judy said, this is something that if it's been proven not to work, updating it, adding some season to it is not going to make it taste any different or the outcomes any different. And it's lovely that, they're at a point where they want to do better. I think the tides are turning, and I think, look, the fact that Lucy Calkins came out and said, I need to update this program, says a lot, and that's great. But I also think fundamentally the fact that there was no apology given is also massively frustrating, particularly as an end, not a user, but an end product of that experience. I fundamentally feel like someone owes me an apology. It's not me.
But not only no apology, but also pay on top of it to fix the mistake.
Yeah.
And don't get Faith started on TC and Lucy.
Honestly,
remember we were going to play a game where we take shots every time we say Lucy.
I know.
There's my iced coffee.
You might stay up all night, Judy.
I think so.
There's no work tomorrow. School's on break.
Yeah, so we could play the Lucy game.
Yeah, I just think like we're at a point where if we know something is not working, why are we adding more layers to something that is massively dysfunctional? Like you said, Judy, this is a very dysfunctional relationship. At some point, you have to get out of it because it's not going to get any better. Yeah. And if it doesn't get any better, who is at fault, right? If you know you're in a really bad situation, you need to get out and you need to get your resources together to get out. And I think we're at that cross point where the day of reckoning is here. We have decades, generations of outcomes of the end results of this program. And you cannot tell me that we have, that the outcome of, call it what it is, functional literate adults is acceptable. There's no place in this country, and show me a job that allows you to have the end result people who have been failed, and that's fine. It's not fine. And the fact that we have resigns is like 20% of the population is just not going to read. Oh, well, then we should have a conversation why that's acceptable, because it looks
It's a
like
life skill. It's a life skill, just like swimming, learning how to drive a car.
Yeah.
Reading is a fundamental life skill, and it's a social justice issue if it's not attained.
I will share this one quick tiny story. Dyslexia is a very deeply genetic component. And I've said this for a long time because it lives out in my household, that if we have a child that has a reading disability, there's a high likelihood that one of their parents or someone in their family has a reading disability. And there's deep shame that's associated with that. No one's walking around going, yeah, I can't read, So I know my husband now for almost 25 years this year. And every time he would get a parking ticket, he would give me his card, he would give me the parking ticket, and he would ask me to pay for it. And, begrudgingly, for every time he gets a parking ticket, I get all like sassy. And I'm like, what do you think you are? I'm not your secretary. I should get paid for this, years and years and years, right? Or like whenever he had anything to get filled out, he's like, listen, I really don't have time. Can you just fill this out for me? I'm like, whatever. Like, and it wasn't until I started working on this project that we were talking. I don't know if you want to get into it, but there's also a documentary about us that's about our story, individual story, about our journey. And the director was interested in talking to him, and we were talking about, just how it was for him to struggle to read, and how that's why we unfortunately had to leave the public school system literally to save my youngest son. And he was like, listen, I don't want him to experience what I experienced. And we started, for the first time in over 20 years, he started to divulge some of his story. And it then occurred to me that every single time he's given me his parking ticket and his card is because he couldn't read the website. And I asked him, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, is it because you can't read the website? He's like, yeah, I have a hard time reading it and I'm too ashamed to say it. So I just, let you say whatever you want to say as long as it gets paid. And that's just a snapshot of like an adult who's massively talented in the space that he's in. But it's that deep shame that you carry that you don't want to get outed. You don't want people to make fun of you. Like, it starts in the classroom.
Yeah,
It sure does.
so here's something for both of you. Listening to you, Naomi, you speak so eloquently on this, really. But there are some quotes from this article from teachers and principals. I want to just say a couple of them here. In education, what seems to happen is people throw the baby out with the bathwater, said a Bronx principal who spoke on condition of anonymity. There's no one program or curriculum that solves all. And basically, it goes on here. It says, they're being thoughtful at Teachers College about this research and where those gaps are. In other words, in thinking about adding decodable books and the units of study, that, come on, give them a chance to make good on this. And there were other quotes in here, again, so I have not tried to simply have a one size fits all. That's another person who said, I do get some pushback from some schools who have been using this as an approach, and it feels like it works for them. So I have not tried to simply have a one size fits all. So that there are teachers who feel, this approach is fine. And, they might want to say, you dyslexia moms, you're a small number. I'm sure you felt like that. So why should we have to turn ourselves upside down just to satisfy a small number of people when it seems to be doing okay? You know, that's not how I feel. I'm reading it because I'm taking the quotes from here. So both of you, I'd love to hear what you have to say when you hear principals, teachers talk about this as if it's a burden for them to have to change, that really we should, continue and maybe tweak it a bit.
I would say that, going back to the original comment I had, there is no other space in any professional setting that is ever acceptable to have any person do anything less than 100% in achievement. No other space. I think this narrative that is just a group of this, and I've heard this, I see it, I've been tagged on it on Twitter, that I am, just a dyslexia mom who I don't see why we need to change curriculum to maybe 20% of the population that can't read. But on the flip side, what people don't understand is that structured literacy is proven scientifically to support 95% of all readers. So this is
Right
not
on.
my dyslexic child. This is for everyone's child. What people don't also acknowledge is that those readers who struggle to read on TC, a lot of those parents ended up getting tutoring outside of the classroom.
Hello.
supplement-
Here we are. That's what we do.
Yeah, they're supplementing the support that actually, if we
Bingo.
have a curriculum that can teach a child to read the first time, would not, I hate to burst the tutoring industry, but there wouldn't be a need for that.
Nothing would make me happier than to be on the other side of this preventing problems rather than picking up the problem.
That's funny that Naomi said that. I actually wrote down my own little quote. I tutor a hell of a lot of kids under these circumstances. Why? I live in a wealthy town, work in the South Bronx. I'm busy on Saturday morning. Very, very busy. This shit doesn't work anywhere. In my town, they're still using it in TC, and it has to change. And you know what's going to happen? Faith has the right mindset. You know when change happens? When parents become more informed and say, this shit's not happening anymore. It is time to make sure that every kid can read. Does that mean that everything that I learned in my past is wrong? No, there were great things. There were actually great things. And I talked about it on previous episodes. I'm not going to go back to that, but something has to change. Enough is enough. And you know what? I hope that parents, not just in the suburbs, make noise, because we had one episode, my friend Izzy, she's African-American. I said, Izzy, why are more African-American moms screaming on Twitter? And she said, you know what? There's a stigma. It's not easy to scream, hey, my kid is struggling.
Yeah.
But I think it's time for parents to become super brave and say, shit, this has to end now. It's not okay anymore. What the hell is going on in that classroom? And if my kid can't read, it is your responsibility to ensure that my kid comes out literate.
Absolutely.
It's not
I have to say
optional.
something about Izzy. It's interesting. I don't know if you watched that episode, Naomi, with Izzy.
Trey and Izzy.
Trey Hadrick and Isabel Simmons. But Izzy said something that I would love to hear what you think. She said that complaining is a privilege. I will never forget that. That stuck with me. And, you really have to feel worthy enough in this space to be able to stand up for yourself. Your thoughts on that as somebody who is a Latina, am I saying that right?
Yes.
Because honestly, I'm old. So for me, I grew up, no, I'm serious though. I grew up that it was Hispanic. Then it was Latino, Latina. Now it's Latinx. And I don't mean to be rude, but I don't know if I'm saying the right
No,
thing.
listen, I appreciate you asking. I love being Latina. I will keep with my was saying I'm Latina. I absolutely fundamentally agree with her. There's that saying with now past Senator Lewis is good trouble, right? So there's this ideology that you have to be able to say something, and in the space of advocacy or just being a parent for your child, you have to know what you are asking for. And I think one of the things that I've always said about my oldest son is that he's my training wheels in this process. Unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know. And it's one of I think as you heard in the podcast with New York Times, it's one of the one thing I wish I can redo is if I can go back and take everything that I now know and use it. I know he would have a massively different outcome.
I'm sending you this book. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sending you this book because your story, and I think I've said this to you, your real life story is this story that's a fictional account of a family, hoping that people wouldn't struggle the way your family did. I'm trying to prevent that. And I have a copy in Spanish. So
That's
I'm
pretty
sending
cool, right?
you both.
Yeah.
And,
I can't wait to read it. I cannot wait.
I want you to have that as a gift because I think it's really important in the work that you're doing.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned is that once you start highlighting a problem, you will have to be ready to follow through on that journey. And I will tell you that it made me sworn enemies with some teachers and some principals in my school district because I pushed and I pushed and I pushed and I never took no. I refused to take no. Even some school counselors, I was like, no. And I remember one time that I had a standoff with a school counselor around something on my son's IEP. And I had known what was going on. And then when I saw it in action, the teachers were like, she was giving her her review, and the teacher's like, I don't know whose child that is, but it's not this one. This is not what we're saying in the classroom. And she just wanted to wrap up the meeting and have me sign the IEP. And I said, I am not signing the IEP. I do not fundamentally believe what's there. I have some problems with it. And she was like, well, we have to end the meeting. I said, well, I'm not signing the IEP. And I literally took the rest of the day off. So I can stay here all day.
I've been at those kind of marathon IEP meetings, that's for sure.
And what ended up happening was it came to light that the reason the school psychologist did not want to entertain the conversation was because in order to satisfy what I was inquiring, she had to do another set of battery of exams that she didn't want to do. But these are things that you do not know until you start asking and prodding. You have to understand that then you become labeled as a troublemaker, as your calls your calls stop getting answered, your emails start going into a black hole. But the fact that you're consistent and you're committed to doing that is a testament of like how unwavered you have to be in your child's education. But understand that as a person of color, when you're trying to advocate in this space, the answers always comes differently when you're someone that's not. Mm-hmm. And that's always, and I've known that in this space. I know, like, if I was a GNT parent, my concerns would be addressed like this. Curriculums will probably come out of the sky for me. But because I wasn't, because I was a parent with a child that was struggling and I was open and honest about it, I was immediately made to seem like it was my fault. Somehow it was me. I was always getting questions, everything okay at home, as if like, if whatever, the perception was of me and my home and my child was the reason he couldn't read.
Correct. Correct. Judy, as I was reading this article, it seemed as though the chancellor, David Banks, really wants this change. And yet he kind of knows that the principals have the last say, that everybody makes their own decisions in schools. The principals have complete autonomy to choose what they want. What do you think about this idea that every school could kind of do their own thing? And yet it seems as though the mayor and the chancellor want this change, and yet it's so slow to happen. What do you think about that?
My honest opinion, I think it's happening pretty fast. I think
You think
that there are
happening quickly?
I do. Right now, I feel that way. Yep. I think it's really happening on the district levels. I hear more buzz about it from my friends, from my fellow coaches. I hear principals that are getting trained in letters now. I haven't heard about that before. So I think great things are happening, but I think there's one roadblock. I think that, I don't know how it is in other states, but, teacher ratings are attached in many, many schools to leveled literacy, F&P, TC running records. And that's sending a very mixed message to teachers like, wait a minute, am I doing this or am I doing that? However, I think New York City is going to be the city that the whole world is going to look at as the pioneers to say, we are doing this. We are taking this seriously. We are using universal screeners. We are getting to be experts in Acadians, math, growth.
Then why are they saying in this article that only 48% of the people, rather 48% of the schools that they asked are still doing TC? That doesn't seem like that's happening quickly. Plus, they said that another 200 probably are using it. So based on the numbers in this article, that doesn't sound like it's happening so quickly to me. Naomi, your thoughts?
Here, I think one thing that people need to keep in mind is the true size of the New York City public school system.
Yes.
Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have 1,800 schools?
I don't.
It's more. I'll look it up quickly, but we have a massive amount of schools under one jurisdiction, and even more principals, administrators, thousands of teachers. Truth is, to when you think about how this started, just under this administration, shy of 2 years ago, to where we are right now, it seems like light years ahead. You also have to understand that our group has been advocating this now for 4 years under the previous administration, and that was, a lot of people were like, yeah, that's great work, but no one kind of had the drive or the want to implement anything. So the fact that we're here is a massive testament to what the commitment is. I think also there's a deep understanding that the amount that is allocated for Carter cases in New York City is astronomical. And for those who do not know what Carter cases are, these are the cases, like myself, when you leave the public school system and you go to a private school, you then have to sue the Department of Education every year to get your tuition reimbursed. And the minute you set a sort of a precedent of the need, that means that, for every year your child's in that school, the Department of Education is responsible for reimbursing you for that child's tuition. I mean, that bucket alone in New York City is in the billions. They set aside billions of dollars every year to pay for these children's tuition.
Mm-hmm.
That's a testament of how much they understand that they know they cannot meet the needs of kids. And it's just not children. It's not just children with dyslexia. It's, children with various
Mhm.
needs
Yeah.
that cannot be met in a traditional public school.
Mhm.
But I think I firmly do believe we're at a crossroads here.
I think so too, Naomi.
And I've said this, if New York City public schools, the biggest monstrosity of a bureaucracy in the country, can move towards structured literacy, any place in this country, and honestly, I always think bigger, in the globe, can do the same, because TC is not just in the United States.
No,
TC
no, it's
Yeah,
all
we learned
over.
about
balanced
that on
literacy is everywhere.
Yes.
I've heard
Yes.
from a teacher in Ireland who told me
Yes.
the same thing.
Yes,
I
yes.
think another thing that should be acknowledged is that there is a state that started to do this work years ago, Mississippi.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mississippi started to do this many years ago.
Yes.
They had a different approach. They don't have unions. They didn't have to deal with all of that. So they went ahead and trained everyone.
Mhm.
It took years, but they went from one of the lowest scoring states in literacy in their students to one of the top. And
Mhm.
within, it took a while, because literacy is not just a plug and play. You don't plug in kids to an alphabetic phonemic awareness plug-in and they're fine. But it took, after a couple of NAEP scores, they're now at the top. So you can't tell me that this is not something that's replicable if we are willing to put dollars behind it.
I had something to add also, if you don't mind. So I think that many good things were happening in the city school system for a while. Universal literacy was definitely an initiative where there were so many passionate people that were shifting. So there were a lot of people shifting, but I think one of the hardest things is in New York City, every time there's a new mayor, comes a new chancellor. So here potentially is all this good work. How do we make sure that if something good is starting, that it's sustainable and not like, okay, that's it, new mayor's in town, new chancellor's in town, we're
That
starting
happened in
over.
reading first. So just to
That
tell you,
happened.
well, in reading first,
Yeah.
we would go in and work with school districts. And because these were low performing school districts, once these principals were trained, they would leave. And so they would go to school districts where there was higher pay, and we would lose them, and then it was starting all over again. So not only were the kids, it was a transient population, was also transient as far as the people who worked in a lot of these
So
districts.
what's the solution, Faith? That could happen again.
So
That could happen.
exactly. So that's the problem, that when you do this good work, all it takes is another leader coming in with an opposing view, and then it just
You're back to square
back
one.
to square one. Exactly. So this is such an interesting conversation. I mean, we could talk all night, but I know that people have limited attention spans. And so I want to start trying to move into wrapping this up a bit. One thing that I noticed in this article, they talked about getting buy-in from teachers. And I agree with that in order for things to happen, it starts at the top. It starts with leadership. And then the next step is this buy-in. How do we get buy-in, Naomi? And, and Judy, you'll comment, just as far as, you're behind two schools now that are these specialized schools for dyslexia. Correct. You're piloting this in two places. Are you looking for buy-in in more places? Is this going to be available to lots of kids? Because as you said, New York City is huge. So are you making a dent? Are you planning on expanding this? Is this just the beginning? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So just to be clear, we're just in one place. We're the ones doing the work in the South Bronx. There's some amazing other folks doing a lot of other stuff elsewhere, but the one piece that we can control is the one that we're doing is the one.
Naomi, you're in the South Bronx every day?
I am not in the South Bronx every day. We have someone on site who is there every day. Bless her soul, Elia Edwards. She deserves an award, a medal, a ticket tape parade
I'm in the
because
South Bronx every day.
yeah,
Woo,
she's
woo.
in that building every day with those teachers, with the students. She's doing amazing work.
That's cool.
And literally she's our pilot director. She's the one that's like really the guiding light of our vision. And again, she's a mom with a child that struggled to read with dyslexia just as well. So and she's an educator herself. And she talks about the moment where the professional met the personal and how it kind of all, she had a moment of the blinders came off. And once you see what you could not see, it's hard to ever go back there. You know, our vision is there. We know that one school, or our vision is to have a school in every borough. That's not going to cut it. It's just not. It's not going to be the end all be all. And the one piece that we know is fundamental to this whole entire work is the teacher training component. So that's one of our, you know, 10 poles of our approach is creating a teacher pipeline, if you will, or teacher training opportunity where we can give up. We've finessed and created already 2 summers in a row an opportunity for teachers who are interested in structured literacy to take a summer training component, and then we partner them up with Windward teachers who do this work every day as their job over the summer, and we create like a mentorship type of approach where they're working in the classroom with the students, but then they have mentor hours where they are working and doing lesson plans together. And we find one of the major feedbacks that we've heard is the teachers have said, I appreciate the hands-on mentorship that I'm getting, because when you're in the training, you're going, oh my God, how am I supposed to even fathom to do this?
100%.
Right? Because everything is like this. You're on a schedule, you got things you got to get done. But once you're in the classroom and then you see how it's being implemented and you see how it's supposed to happen, over time, you start to see the outcomes. And that's one of the things that we heard from one of our teachers.
Yes.
So back to our approach, we want to create a teacher training opportunity. We also want to create opportunities with districts if they are interested in this, how this can happen. You know, we can come in and talk about, you know, if they're interested and they want to talk about curriculum, if they want to talk like how do we even start, we can help them, guide them along the way. I want to share a story from one of our teachers that she shared 2 weeks ago when we went to visit the school. One teacher highlighted, there's 6 teachers currently who have been trained and are working with the students. And one of these teachers had a student in our program last year. And she says he did not move. And he walked in unable to even write his name. He was pre-alphabetic. He's in the 3rd grade. And she doesn't have him this year. She's in a different class. But the teacher that does have him this year shared a story how he was having a fight with another kid, and you know they weren't getting along. And the teacher said, you know what, come up during lunch, we're gonna hash this out together, we're gonna talk about it. She brings them up to the class and they start doing the whole pointing. He did. She's like, oh. She gave him 2 sheets of papers, 2 pencils. She said, write it down. These kids started like writing down and talking. And so they hashed it out. But the piece that is massively amazing is that one of the kids that was writing down his feelings and what he wanted to express was that kid who in September was pre-alphabetic and could not write his name.
Wonderful.
And that teacher who had him last year describes how learning what she's learned this year and seeing the growth of these students has meant the world to her, because she's described how hard it is to even learn something new, how you don't want to do something new. You think you know the answers, and it's hard. It's hard to change. It's hard to accept that, you know, you didn't know and you were stuck in a situation and you were just doing as you were being told. But once you learn something different and you start to see the outcomes in that classroom, I will tell you, every single one of our children in this pilot has moved.
That's
Some
wonderful.
has moved leaps and bounds.
Mhm.
Some is moving along, but they all are moving.
Mhm.
And that's the testament to the work, how transformative it can be. And if it's a teacher that's seeing that transformation, you
That's
can't
it.
deny it doesn't work.
Right, success breeds success. Judy, buy-in, comments about buy-in. Do you think that there are ways to get more buy-in from teachers so that they wouldn't feel like this is being forced upon them? That they would
I think
actually come around wanting this? Is there a way to get
in
more?
my experience, with enough coaching,
Mhm.
enough modeling of lessons and co-teaching and so forth, I think buy-in will definitely happen, because say you come to a teacher, their data's low, they're like, oh my God, what do I do? How do I shift it? When you start talking about foundational skills and the shifts you can make, they're so manageable, because first, you might start with phoneme segmentation. Great, a kid got a little better at that. Then start looking at a nonsense word, being able to make the sounds and sliding through. Then automatically read the word. It's so much more manageable than saying, oh, a kid is a level A, and then 3 months later, they're still a level A, and then it's March, it's an emergency. Oh my God, they haven't moved. I
Right.
think with structured literacy, it follows a scope and sequence. It can be much more manageable. I think we need to support our teachers to try to get the right resources into their hands. I know a lot of teachers are stressed out, they don't have time to print out a lot of books. So it's working as a team, but also providing our teachers with the resources that match what we're saying. Because it's very hard to say, we're shifting from balanced literacy to structured literacy, but then the books in the class are still, I can swim, I can run, I can fly.
Exactly.
I can go on a
100%.
tractor, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So I think
Exactly.
buy-in comes when we provide the right level of support, love, and shifting mindsets takes some time for some people. But I think it's being able to meet people where they're at
Yes.
and making baby steps. Because I think once you really feel the success that can happen with structured literacy, and you see teachers becoming experts. I know, Faith, we go back and forth all the time about syllable types, but I literally fell in love with syllable types about 6 years ago. Like, I love them because reading has a code. There's a code. It's not just making the sound for the first letter. It's being able to decode the whole word. Wow, a vowel team. It says eat, meat. The vowels say E. It's just sad that for so long we've made kids rely on the first letter and look at a picture and then cross-check back and forth. Like, enough. Like,
Right.
look at the word.
Right.
It's not
And
that hard.
I agree with you with the coaching element too, because, and just like you said, Naomi, teachers could be in this training and they're so deep in the training that they don't have time to reflect.
That's right.
And it's really the coaching and being able to have this sustainable model that helps them to finally see, oh, I can do this. Because a lot of resistance is fear
Yep.
of failure, fear of looking like they don't know something. And so fear comes out where they'll start to attack, they'll get defensive. And when I say they, I'm saying, people who seem to be more resistant than others. A lot of that is fear, I think. And then when you support people and you let them know there's nothing to be afraid of, that we're learners together and to breathe and take your time, it over time, there is that shift that occurs. But I do agree with the idea that leadership is pivotal. That's where it's at. It's so important. So let's wrap up, ladies. I think this was a fantastic conversation. Naomi, any last thoughts you have that we didn't cover?
I think one thing I wanted to mention briefly is also, I think we need to revamp the approach that we have with education in general. I know just as a parent, when I would go to parent teacher night and walk into the classroom, I always look at where my kid is sitting. I always want to see his desk or her desk. And one of the things that always, and now that I'm in this work, I'm seeing things through a different lens. When I would walk into the classroom and at the amount of plastered words that were everywhere, as a parent, I was like really overwhelmed. I mean, aside from like my child who has ADHD and all this other stuff, but there was this assumption, like, if you don't know the words are in the room. So like, you have to like look around. And
yes,
I think we need to understand that, you know, having poster boards of just like words everywhere means nothing. Curtains of, like, I remember one
I
classroom
said the same thing.
has like had strings that look like curtain rods, and it
Mhm.
was just like poster boards of words on these strings across the whole entire classroom. And I was like, oh my God, how are we supposed to do this? But I think we need to understand, like, these are practices that we're encouraged, that we're told that, you know, you're doing a great job, and let's fill the room with words, and they will love to learn to read. They will love to go into that cozy corner with that book and do independent reading. But none of that is going to be substantiated or be better if the child doesn't have the skills that they need to read. You know, reminder, K-2, you're learning to read.
Thank
After
you.
third grade, you read to learn. And
Yes,
if you do not know how to learn, if you don't know how to read, math is not going to be fun
That's right.
with word problems. Science is never going to land. History, you're never going to understand. Aside from ELA, even PE, there's some reading in PE as well.
yes.
So I think we need to understand that it's fine, and it's not fine, but I think we need to finally come to terms that the way we've been doing things was not productive, was not helpful. Let's go to where the science, I mean, if we love science and we're reading critical thinking, the science has said where it should go. Let's go to that. Our hope also through Literacy Academy Collective is that our school can be a lighthouse school, that we can showcase what it looks like. We will have students who are moving. We can showcase how that move has changed, and also hopefully give the courage to others to say, take the leap of faith. Let's look at the curriculum. Let's change it. And it starts with little things. Let's have I know DOE is really pushing letters. Let's have everyone do letters, because letters is agnostic of any curriculum. It's literally learning the science of what it is to read. I took letters. I'm not an administrator, and I have my book right here. I took it myself because I wanted to know what people are learning. And that's, if once we have that inquisitive, critical thinking, we start to realize that there is a better way. And once we know the better way, everyone benefits, not just our children, but also parents.
Thank you. Thank you. Judy, last thoughts?
I'm going to try to be brief. Okay, so shout out to all those reading experts. Stop sending mixed messages. Today you like this, tomorrow you like that. We have to all be on the same page of what's the solution and how we move forward. The whole literacy block needs to be looked at from start to finish, so that kids can take those skills that are taught in isolation and transfer them into text. I also want to wrap up by saying, follow us on Twitter at BoxnerJudy. Faith's Twitter handle is at Faith Workowski from High Five Literacy. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts and YouTube, The Literacy View, Real Teachers Letting Loose, and join our Facebook group, The Literacy View, Real Teachers Letting Loose. Woo!
Woo! All right. So I just want to thank you, Naomi. You just really were such a wonderful guest. I think parents are going to just absolutely love listening to you. And I would love to visit the city and see exactly what you're doing.
All right,
So,
Judy and Faith, let's go on a road trip.
I think I'd like a road trip to see what you're doing. And please invite me. I would love to see it. I think I'm here on Long Island, and I think there's a district right here doing some great work too. They've been bombarded with a lot of visits lately. So I'd like to this time go and make a visit.
Me
So
too.
Absolutely.
please invite me. And like I said, I'm going to
Absolutely
send you
will.
some of my books. And I just want you to also see on my website, it's called ifonlybooks.com. I have a free document that actually I think your organization would love to use. It's called Can You See Me? And it's a way of opening up conversation, like you said, with guidance counselors and social workers and people who might not really understand this. So take a look at that, and you could download it for free. So,
Great.
all right. So thank you everybody for watching. This was fantastic. And like Judy said, follow us. We hope to see you soon. Thank you.